Hello, welcome back. I'm Jennifer Thompson.
And I'm Chad Thompson.
And this is season 7
of The Premise.
Where we get to the story behind the storyteller. We've got some amazing authors lined up for you this season. And guess what? The San Diego Writers Festival is coming up in just a couple months, folks. It's March 28th at the Coronado Public Library. It's free to everyone. And this year's keynote is Jodi Picoult. So make sure and mark your calendars. We'll see you there. And for The Premise, we've just got an amazing lineup of people who are going to talk about storytelling and writing and publishing and just,
And cars.
And cars and pasta. So stay tuned. And be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Italian cars.
Hello and welcome back to The Premise. I'm Jennifer Thompson.
And I'm Chad Thompson.
And I am especially excited about today's interview with Janell Strube. She is very close to my heart. We've known each other for many, many years. And I remember when you were writing this book, and now here we are celebrating it. So congratulations.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, and thank you, both of you, for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. So I'll tell you, dear listener, who Janell Strube is, and then we'll dive right in. Janell Strube is a biracial author and poet whose lyrical prose illuminates the search for belonging, dignity, and connection. Drawing on her experience as an adoptee, foster and adoptive mother, and corporate tax executive, don't forget that part, she writes about identity and resilience with unflinching honesty. Her historical novel, Adélaïde, Painter of the Revolution, follows one of the first women admitted to the French Royal Academy of Painting and Sculpture. Her poetry has appeared in San Diego Poetry Annual and A Year in Ink, and excerpts of her memoir have been published in Shaking the Tree, brazen short memoir. Janell lives in San Juan Capistrano, where she is completing a full-length memoir and developing her next novel. Janell, welcome to The Premise.
Thank you.
So, this book has so many layers and so many things I want to get into, but I think before we even dive in, we should just tell our listeners, what is this book about?
This book is about a woman who really stopped at nothing to follow her dream. So who it's really about is a woman named Adélaïde Labille-Guiard, who was a talented artist who just wanted to be viewed for her work and the quality of what she produced. And in order for her to do that, she had to overcome all kinds of systems before the French Revolution and during the Revolution so that she could be seen for her work. And to me, that's the essence. But out of that, she also turned to supporting other women and fighting for working women's rights.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big theme in the book. Mm-hmm. And what made you decide to write about Adélaïde?
So in the beginning, I was writing about a different artist, actually. And that's its own story of how I came to that. But I'll short circuit that story by saying that when I was in college at UC Riverside, I wanted to major in art history. And in class, I noticed that they weren't talking about women artists, basically at all. And I thought that was strange. I didn't understand. My sister was an artist. My birth mother was an artist. There are many women artists around. And so I just asked the question innocently in class one day. And it sort of brought the class to a halt. And the professor turned from the lectern and what he had up on the slide. And he said, "Well, Miss Strube, no woman has ever contributed meaningfully to the history of the arts."
Wow.
Damn.
Yeah.
So in those days, I was not a loudmouth at all. And I was really crushed, actually.
Yeah.
So I left that class. I continued through that semester. And then I graduated from college a year early. And I did not pursue an art history major because I thought, why am I doing this? So I just went to work. And that was a really long time ago, but I still loved art.
Yeah.
And I still studied art on my own. And a long time after that, I was in the Louvre and I was going through the Rococo Gallery. And every time I go to Paris, I go to some museum. And I've been to the Louvre a lot. And I was walking through the gallery and naming all my favorite Rococo artists. So think Boucher and other ones like that with the fripperies and the swing and the slipper. And I come across this painting, and it's unlike anything else in the room. It looks like a Grecian Madonna and Child, kind of in green. And it just leapt out at me. And the woman in the painting, I felt that she was staring at me, and she had a message for me. And I thought, who's this artist?
Yeah.
And then I looked down, and it's a woman.
Lo and behold.
It was a woman. And I'm like, wait a minute. I think I've been told a lie all this time. And so I began to find out about her. So that's Elizabeth Vigée Lebrun. And I'm that person who dives into everything. And so as I was studying about her, I came across this phrase about another artist that said, by that time, her paintings had long gone up in flames. I was like, wait a minute, what just happened?
Right.
That sounds like a crime to me.
Yeah.
And so that is Adélaïde Labille-Guiard. So then I had to add her into the story, but my story began to get really long. So I got some advice when I was in Dubai to write about the one who wasn't famous. Now,
Interesting.
all of them were
Yeah.
actually famous in their time,
Sure.
even infamous in their time. But that's how I began, just to write about Adélaïde first and to tell her story. I visited a painting of hers, one of only a few that is in public display at the New York Metropolitan Museum. And she had the coolest gaze. And I felt she looked out at me and she said, "You can't tell my story." And so I said, I'm going to try. So this is the story that I told about her
Wow.
life.
Yeah. Was it difficult to find information about her?
It was. And the first reason is because there's very little academia about her. And if you can imagine a woman that was so famous that many people came to listen to her speeches like they did Robespierre. And she really was very successful in art, and she contributed politically. She contributed to the new government. And by the end of the revolution, she wasn't even allowed to use her own name.
Wow.
And so that is really the other part of the crime. And I don't really cover that part in my book, but I think it's beginning to be a part of what I'm doing as a talk on the price of legacy and daring to be different and what happens.
So why couldn't she use her name?
So she was not allowed to. She could only call herself Madame Vincent, a student of her husband. So can you imagine this woman who had done everything, made it to the very top, and then she couldn't even use her own name.
Wow.
And she died not too long after that. And I really feel that she died of a broken heart because she tried and worked so hard at what she did, and she was left with nothing. So I don't take the book to that place, but that's how I feel about the woman in life.
Yeah. And so many women in history have been basically their fire extinguished, not even allowed to spark, really.
Right. And I think I was very motivated, oddly, from a young age. One of the first essays I wrote about an erased person was about Queen Hatshepsut. This is going way back to Egypt. But all of Karnak was mostly built by her. And yet they did not know that because her stepson chiseled her name out of everything and put his name there.
Oh my gosh.
So this
Wow.
has been going on for millennia.
Yeah.
And there are many other examples in history. But I think even today we can take a look and see that. So I wanted to tell the story of this woman and everything that she had done. And I wanted to tell the story in a way that looked at her whole life, not at a little slice of it, and had more of an epic quality to it, because I felt that sometimes we don't examine the lives of women. And so there might be slices that people look at and short things, but I wanted to do this woman and what she did justice. And every episode that is public in the book did happen. So just what she did just kept going and going, because that was how her life really happened in that regard.
And I just can't even imagine the work that is involved in when you're writing historical fiction, because, I mean, you created this firecracker of a young lady. So this young woman has a difficult relationship with her mother. She's adored by her father. She's allowed to pursue her art, but really they see it as this hobby, this like plaything that she's doing in the meantime. But they don't want that for her. They want her to marry rich, so that she'll be okay, so she's taken care of. And so in writing historical fiction, I imagine a lot of that you have to sort of fill in the blanks of, how did she navigate this relationship with her parents and then, going out into the world? But you've so fully created this woman who is so alive in the pages of this book.
I drew on my own personal experience and relationships of family that I could recognize.
I was going to ask you about that.
And even the era in which I grew up and the parents that I grew up with that did not want, for my mother, the only things that were acceptable were to be a teacher or a nurse, maybe a librarian. But that was really it. So you get a person like me coming along, and I don't fall in any of that.
You don't play by the rules?
I do not. Absolutely not. So the only thing that happened to me is that the H&R Block person told my mom that she could be a great tax accountant because she kept good records. So look what happened to me.
You became a tax accountant.
I did.
Now, that's interesting to me because when I was reading this book, I had no idea that you had pursued art at one time. And yet it's so obvious in the pages of this book. The way you describe art, the way you describe the light. It felt like you were painting with words.
That's how I feel that I do that. And I love words and I adore light. I love to go to the ocean and watch the light come in the morning and watch it leave and watch all the different colors as the light rays get longer. And I feel that the light is dragged away by the ocean. And so I just love that. And so I love to write about it. And I even have pink walls in my house. And the way that the light changes as it goes through the windows, I get pink light in my house. So I love to describe it. So it's fun for me because it's fun language. And making this visual painting in the mind is something that I love to do.
I feel like you take people into a place of stillness too. Like a lot of time when I was reading about stained glass and the way the light was shining through, there was this moment of complete peace or stillness that was very poetic.
Thank you. I feel that actually every single painting in there, I either had it in a book to look at or I went and traveled to see it. So I try to write about my relationship to the painting I'm seeing and the connection that I feel it has inside me. So I actually decorate cakes. Mentally, I have a mental block. I cannot draw. However, my daughter is an incredible artist. And I feel that watching her grow and develop and how she could not leave art alone is what drove Adélaïde's hands in the book.
Oh, wow.
So because I had a child from the time she was a year old, just like 18 months old, she could draw. You're like, how does that happen? And so I used her for a lot of that.
Nice. Well, I mean, you write what you know, right?
Exactly. That's very good advice.
Pulling from your own experiences and what we see around us. I want to talk about Francois because the relationship that you created between these two people, well, I just kept asking myself, like, was their relationship real? Did that really happen? And if so, how do you know? And what led you toward him?
So she marries him at the end of her life.
I wasn't going to tell anyone this because they have to read the book.
Uh-oh.
But that's okay. We've given just a very small snippet.
That's all you get, listeners.
That's all you get.
Okay. So things were very secret. So now that I've said that part, so any part of their romance before that, there's no evidence of it. But she studied in his father's studio where he was. And somehow after he came back from Italy, factually, she became his student.
Yeah.
So that tells you something.
Yeah, they must have had a relationship,
Yes.
right?
So anything else, however, is totally my story of what happens between them. The only thing that is a little bit different than that is that when I was doing my research, I came across in Francois' work, not hers, I came across something called a sketch called The Artist Lesson. And that is in the back of my book. And I looked at that and I said, oh my goodness, that's them. That's them. Now, when he did that, because it's dated, he and she would have been a lot older than the teenagers that you see in that picture. So that tells its story.
Yeah.
And truly, I did use paintings and sketches to inform everything about this book. So I used that even more than I used maybe research.
Interesting. That is so cool. It's like picking up breadcrumbs.
Yes. And then realizing that I know something that maybe no one else knew about that because I looked at their faces and because I was so familiar with all their self-portraits that they had done. I knew exactly who I was looking at.
Yeah.
It's very exciting.
That is very exciting.
So that informs my story more than anything because factually, if there had been facts out there or something to see, it would have destroyed her career. So that could not have happened.
Absolutely.
Can you imagine trying to do this sort of work with a cubist? You'd never find the person or recognize them.
That would be really hard, right? You'd have to flip your brain to some other complete way. That's true.
There's a way, though. I think you could see,
so.
once you start to
Yeah.
understand.
If you took, and Guernica is not Cubism. So, but there is, and this will be me going off on a segue. There's a Cuban artist who does Cubism and like household women with cages in their skirts.
Yeah.
I just love that. Of course, his name is going to slip my head right now, but
I know
the
who you're talking
story-
about,
Yes,
though, yeah.
Mijares,
Oh.
and just the stories
Well
that
done.
are told in that, I find so fascinating.
I love how, as I was reading it, I'm reading about people who are so entirely dedicated to their craft. I mean, it was beyond an obsession. It was life. It was air.
I wish I could have been like that. It was, but it was sort of
We
like the
don't-
starving artists, but
Yeah.
they weren't starving, but I think they were starving. That's how come they had to get other jobs, but they were supported by the government. And so that was the thing, that if you were supported by the government, you had it made. But if you didn't fit into the mold, like all the women, you were in
Yeah.
big trouble.
Right. So her only choice was really,
To fight, or in the beginning, her choice was to be able to join a guild.
yeah.
So that is what she did. When she was young, she became a member of the guild. And now to get into the guild, you had to be a very talented artist in the first place. And you had to be sponsored in just as you would be an apprentice going into a guild. So that happened for her. And that was really the only path for women then, unless you were some extremely special person that was some protege of the royal family. Because there were a couple of women who did make it into the academy, but they made it because they were absolutely connected and wards of the kingdom. So they made it, but not for her.
Well, and there were 3 spaces. So there's, I don't know how many men in the academy, and they had 3 spaces for women, but only one of them was filled in the beginning of this book,
Yeah.
which is,
And they made
why-
no effort. They were like,
Right.
we don't have to fill it just because it's there,
and it's like, why even have 3 if you're not going to fill it?
so that they could say they did. But it really was lip service. It didn't mean anything. And that's what she found out. And that would be what any woman found out.
So there was a point where, and I know I'm going to butcher his name. He was the director of art.
I call him Dungavier. It's like the,
Oh, yeah.
yes, the Comte Dungavier.
So there was a time when he was speaking, basically he abolished women being in the guild.
Yes.
All of these women were out of work. Their families were going to starve. But in his speech, when he's like giving this announcement or this proclamation, he's speaking of patriotism. Like, how much it mattered to the people and patriotism. And that sort of reminded me of something that's happening now.
Yes, there are so many incredible parallels. So you have this idea that patriotism is all about guns or war or honor and not anything feminine. And so this man was a general before he became basically the guardian of the prince who would become the king. And he looked out and he looked at all the Bouchers and Fragonards of the world. And he said, this is the problem with art and this is the problem with society. So we have to stop all this and we have to change to this militaristic way. You could even think about Germany at the beginning of the war in World War II, where you suddenly change this patriotism and this nationalism and this idea that women are only there to create men for the country.
Yeah.
And so that is also part of what happened to women during the revolution, these women. And they were told, go home and have sons, raise your kids. Don't do this.
Well, that's a common theme, right? It happened under Franco. It happened under Mussolini. It happened under Hitler.
It happened under Mao.
Happened under Mao. It's just...
And in all of these situations, art is taken away.
Right. And think about today. If you have a baby in the next, because I'm a tax accountant, right? The Trump accounts. So if you have a baby in the next 3 years, the government will contribute $1,000. So you're being paid as a woman effectively to have kids right now.
Wow.
It's crazy.
$1,000 seems a little cheap,
$1,000, I'm sorry, is not going to cut the $200,000 to $300,000 cost of having it.
Yeah.
But
which you also have to pay in this country.
yeah.
Right.
Because that's the long term, the
You think
18 years plus college. It's like, this is not going to cut it, people. But that's what's happening. And during the time leading up to the French Revolution, there was this misnomer that the birth rate had lowered and that there weren't a lot
misinformation.
Yeah, it wasn't correct. And so then there was this really big push again. But what I really find fascinating is that there were so many women out working and doing things that just kind of were erased out of this time. But there were many doing many different things. You even have all the women of the salons, but you had chocolate makers and bakers and artists and even the fan painters that Dangeville hated. They were all there. The decorative arts, they were there. The famous fashionistas that created the fashion, those were women.
Yeah.
So they were everywhere, actually, at that time.
What happened to Dangeville after the revolution?
He fled the country because he was accused of stealing France's assets and treasure.
Shocker.
Yeah. So there's a really fun part about that in the book where I take some license with that. But at the end of the day, he never could come back to France because he escaped. And he also escaped being there for the guillotine.
The guillotine.
Yes, so that was a good reason not to come back. And then he spent his life writing defenses of himself and what he had done.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Of course he did.
Yes. But his wife was a totally different story at the end. She stayed behind and she sequestered herself in a dark room for the rest of her life.
Wow.
Yep. So she was
Ashamed.
so ashamed of what he had done. So you think about, and she was very famous for her kindness and her help of the poor. So there's another woman in this book who she does play a pretty big part in this book. And I don't talk about what happens to her in the end, but that is what happened to the real Comtesse Dangeville.
Wow. Yeah, it can make you real angry when you sit down and really think about it. And scared for the future, frankly.
Yes, because there are so many parallels. And even leading up to the revolution, you had the people who were agitating, the very, very wealthy people who owned the mall of what we'd say the mall today. And they didn't want to pay taxes. So they wanted to keep pushing the burden off on the townspeople and the bourgeois. And they, as royalty, did not want to pay taxes. You had the third estate, which is religion, they weren't paying taxes. So all this burden kept happening. And more interesting is the country was in big financial trouble because France had financed our American Revolution. And so that was a big part of why they went bankrupt.
Wow.
So there's so many connections.
Yeah.
So crazy.
I mean, as a tax accountant, when you were researching all this, I'm sure you just couldn't help but look into the financial side of everything.
Completely. It's just out there, right? And I really loved that Adélaïde was a businesswoman. And so there's a lot where I could draw parallels or make her that businesswoman. And her mother was the one that owned the shop that she grew up in. It wasn't her father.
That's true, yeah.
Even though it was her parents' shop, but it was actually the woman who was the person who owned that shop. So I just loved that we have all these ideas of what women have not done in the past and what they were always really doing.
Yeah. And I think it sort of explains, too, why her mother was so opposed to her becoming an artist, because she had struggled and she had built her own business and she wanted her daughter to be taken care of.
That's it. Right.
But in the end...
It wasn't a good idea.
Right.
Yep.
So she marries this terrible, terrible man who is not only abusive, but he's completely dismissive, and then steals her entire dowry. And she is practically homeless.
Yep. So factually, Adélaïde did have to sue him to get her dowry back. So that is accurate. And the ways to sue someone are accurate to the story. And that, you can only imagine how rare it would be for a woman to go to all that to get her money of her parents back. But she didn't have anything if she didn't have that. You couldn't have a bank account. You couldn't work. She couldn't work as what she needed to do. So she had to do something. And it took a very long time for her to get it back. And Guillard actually was a treasurer in the church.
In the
church.
So
you think that's very interesting. So from that, you have to think, how could this happen? What could happen here? So there are places where the fact is she got her dowry back. Now, how did she get it? This is what she would have done because this is what church law required. Now, who was he in the church? So how would that have worked? And so those are all the dots that I put together to come up with the story of what happens between them.
And her bravery and her resilience is just incredible. At every turn, she's just facing another wall, but she will not give up on her dream.
She doesn't. She doesn't. And that is why I say she's so determined. And the book explores the cost or the efforts that people will go to follow their dreams and their muse and their talent.
You know, this is a good place for us to pause because I really wanted you to read a passage from the book, which is the passage, I think it's page 59, for those of you listeners reading along in your hymnal. A section where she's... It really spoke to me because it sort of describes her like she's a trapped bird. And it's such a beautiful passage. So I'll just let you read it. If you want to give people some intro into it, go right ahead.
Okay. This is the day that she marries the man she does not want to marry, but it's the one that is her parents' choice. So she's marrying him. And so this is the passage. On the morning of August 25th, 1769, Adélaïde Labille, aged 20, and Louis Nicolas Guillard, aged 30, married in the church of Saint Eustache, the church where her parents had baptized a growing family, where Félicité had married, where her brother's sister and mother were buried. The height of the vaulted ceiling made Adélaïde dizzy. It floated 100 feet above them, resting on soaring buttressed walls whose sides were pierced by religious scenes carved in stained glass. Patterned beams of colored light streamed across the nave. How small I am, and how short the distance from aisle to altar, she thought, as her father walked her with measured steps toward Nicolas Guillard and the priest. Yet how long a marriage, hidden and mysterious in dark shadows like the gallery rimming the ceiling. She was shaking inside. It should have been Francois waiting for her. When she and her father arrived at the sacraments, the sound of flapping wings startled her. A pigeon trapped in the apse flung itself against the glass barriers that kept it from the light. She imagined it was her frantic soul. Nicolas Guillard took her hand, tall, Stocky, more bourgeois than aristocratic, he had a round face, a heavy look about the jaw, and a rough complexion that reddened with emotion. With his gray velvet coat and breeches embroidered in floral patterns, his cravat that fell in elaborate folds, the Belgian lace at his sleeves, and the wig with 2 rows of curls and a sack ponytail covering his blonde hair, he was everything her mother would have wanted to see in a bridegroom. It should have been Francois next to her, wearing his usual black. Their distorted images appeared in the chalice raised by the priest, and she observed that he was not handsome, nor she beautiful. But her clothes matched his for elegance. She wore the satin stomacher her mother had embroidered with silver thread for Felicity's wedding over a silver satin sack gown with double ruffles, her hair curled, powdered, and piled high over a wig for the occasion. Her mother would have approved of her sartorial choices. I put more thought into what I would wear today than what my marriage would be like, she thought. Her whispered words to honor and obey wafted upward into a space that had heard such vows for 1,000 years, and beneath the whitewashed wooden roof supported by massive striated stone columns, an ancient ritual transmuted her into a vessel for her husband to have and to hold. When the priest pronounced them man and wife, her father beamed with pride. In the sacristy, the assistant brushed sand across their names in the register, and Claude handed the settlement document to Nicholas, sealed with gold wax and wrapped in a silver ribbon.
Wow. So, because I've read the book, you know, that scene to me was so powerful because everything in her being wants to be with Francois. Mm-hmm. And this man's older, she doesn't know him, and she doesn't care about money, she doesn't care about the name, you know, so she really was this trapped bird. And I love the way you bring us into that space. And it feels cloistered, and it feels scary.
Thank you. I loved writing it, and I went and sat in that church.
Did you? Mm-hmm. Of course you did.
Of course I did. Awesome. And I had pictures of everything, and I had all the dimensions. But on one of my trips, I just went in there and sat. Mm-hmm. And I was actually in the Hagia Sophia one time, and there were birds trying to get out. Mm. And so it was something that was real. Yeah. But just the feeling of being trapped in glass was something that it drew me to this scene to write about.
That makes sense. Yeah. Well, it's really well done. I also really want to talk about the clothing, the material, the curtains, the wigs, the powder, like, you know, just even the language you use when you're writing about this time and place. I mean, you really have to transport your thinking into a whole new era and be very clear on, you know, they dressed differently than we do. I mean, they wore wigs, the men powdered themselves. So I would love to know about like your research and, you know, how much work did it take to get into that mindset?
Research is a dangerous thing. So you could research forever. Mm-hmm. And so I bought books because I have a lot of books in my house. I probably have 40 books on this era of time. Wow. So I have books on fabric and dresses. I use the internet to get images of people's wigs and the types of wigs and the names of them. But there were also fashion plates and little magazines that would tour the country at that time. And so when people wanted to know what the fashion was, they would see these plates. So they would even have the names and the lists on them. So if you could get some of those, like when you went to a museum and buy them, that could be part of your research that you did. But definitely trying to understand in the particular era, what was the style versus some other style was very important, because I think one of the things about writing historical novels, you really need to be accurate, because no one wants to be the person who has whiteout inside the help, right? And it's like, oh no. So doing that, and also every single word that's in the book, and there are a lot of words, I had to make sure that they existed at that time. Yeah. So I couldn't use okay, because okay came in the 1800s, like 1850, in U.S. or in English language usage, and d'accord, which would be equivalent, did not mean the same thing at the time, even though it existed in French. So trust me, I didn't go around looking for French words or even try to change my language to elevate it to be some past language, because that wouldn't have worked, because I could not possibly speak French of the 18th century. So, but using an elevated language and using poetic elements all the time, I think brings you to that other place.
Well, and to make it interesting too, so you don't lose your reader.
Right. Because you could and I'm definitely a person of layers. If I just wrote this story without the symbolism or the other metaphors or things that happened or alliteration, it would not be fun to me to write, and it would not be authentically me.
Sure.
So I loved it that I had this longer thing to take my poetry and sort of spin it out into fiction.
Right. So did you find yourself like writing a passage and just writing the passage and then going back later and fixing it to, adjust the language and the materials to fit the time? Or did you stop writing and go research it and then write it?
Oh, I researched a long, long time before I did anything. And because I am an accountant, I had this giant Excel spreadsheet that was like those big, huge, I don't know if there's A17 in Europe, but these giant pieces of paper, and they were like 2 deep and like 3 long, just this huge thing.
I can just imagine your office.
It was just a mess, right? And in that is all the stuff coming together. So all the people, what they did, all the times in history, everything on a grid. And that was how I was able to really put together. And I could predict, if this event happened, these other people are going to be there. Then I would go read someone's biography or some letters that were in the back and the footnotes of a book I was reading. And there I would find it. So I'd be like, yep, I'm on the right track here.
Wow.
And I would do that. But I bought books on architecture of the time, which is why I know that in parts of the city, there was running water and hot and cold water. And there was actually heat that was central heating. And all of that was lost during the revolution. So it really took this great scientific technological leap that they made right before, at the end of the Age of Reason, and took them all back in time.
Lost it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you begin the book, kind of at the end. Talk to us about why you start the book where you did, and what were you thinking, and what was important to you that the reader understand?
So in a way that sort of holds up it.
And tell us how it begins. So,
Okay. So it starts, to my way of thinking, if you could have a drone over the city of Paris that looks on Paris and looks down and comes in closer and closer, and it is seeing flames over Paris, and it is seeing, and it's going into the square at the Place du Louvre, actually the Place du Carrousel, and it's coming closer and closer, and then suddenly you're in Adelaide's body, and she's all alone in this square where all of her paintings are being brought to be burned. So in a sense, it starts right where I learned by that time. Her paintings had long gone up in flames. So it puts me in the suspense of where I imagined her when I first read those sentences. And then I go back in time to when she was 15 and wanting to be a painter, and bringing us forward to the time that happens and a little bit after.
So when you discovered that her work went up in flames, did you write that passage then, or did it bounce around in your head for a while before you put it to paper?
No. So that part bounced around for a long time, the actual passage that I read. But the prologue is the very last thing I wrote in the book.
Is it really?
It is,
Oh, wow.
because the original manuscript had everything starting when she was 15. And so when I was at the community of writers and I went to a screenwriting class and I spoke to some agents, they all felt I should start in a different place. But it literally took me, because I'm slow at everything, it took me almost a year to figure out where, and to see it in my head and say, this is where it needs to start.
Interesting.
And I knew it needed to be somewhere in the revolution, but I wasn't really sure. But then just one day I was like, this is it. And so I kept working on the rest of everything, and I didn't let that go, but where does it start? And then one day I knew where it needed to start. And then I knew this is done now.
How long did it take you to write this book?
So this particular book, when I stopped writing about 3 artists and I started writing about just one, started in 2018. Actually, I think 2017. I was living in Dubai, and I was working on the first draft about Elizabeth Vigée-Lebrun and Jacques-Louis David and Adélaïde. And suddenly I realized, I don't know what to do. This is going to be a Ken Follett-size novel that's going to be enormous. So what do I do? So I went to a writer's festival there, and I got some great advice. And so with that, I took all the scenes that I had done, and I went off to Santorini, and I just wrote the first draft. And so the first draft existed for a really long time, but I think there were about maybe 8 other drafts that came. So I came back to the United States. I ended up in San Diego, and I went to the La Jolla Writers Festival.
Which is where we met.
Yeah, that's where we met. It was a very important writers festival that I went to because I met you there. I also met Marnie there, and Marnie ultimately became the story editor on this book, and Carlos, her husband, kind of like took it over in the middle. So it was the two of them that really helped me and taught me a lot more about writing that I needed to learn to get this story to be where it is.
Wow.
I think my writing is my writing. So the way that I write in a poetic fashion has always been there. But I think Carlos was good to curb it. He's like, it'll be too much. So you space it out in there.
Pull back on the poetry.
Right. And so the poetry gets stretched out in there, and it's not in all places, but I certainly know where. And I am very deliberately quoting certain passages from the Bible, even when I say she's transmuted into a vessel to have and to hold.
Yeah.
That really is pulling on some biblical things. And it's on purpose because it's not about poetry as much as it is about the foreverness of marriage when you don't want to be married to somebody. And so it's just resonating in that idea. And so that's part of the layers that I love to write.
That's cool.
So you won't always notice them if you don't, but they're there if you see them.
Makes me want to go back and read it again and pay more attention.
It's, I think there's something in there for everyone that will resonate in just those little ways because I had fun with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and how you said you sort of stretched out the poetry, that makes sense. The pacing is really good, and in the beginning, I think adding that moment where all of her work is on fire, we know that's going to happen. So it created this tension throughout the book, wondering, like, we know she's going to be able to paint, but we also know she's going to lose everything.
Yep. Yep.
Wow.
And you hold yourself in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. So as a reader, our expectations are set, but we still want to follow along and see, how her resilience pulls her up and how she's actually able to follow her dreams and to help other women do the same.
Right.
Or at least try.
And so I think that it was sort of like, for me, it was being a detective. And I regarded the burning of her work as a crime.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to know all about it.
Yeah. Well, and I know our listeners will too. Let's talk about, we're in Women's History Month, right?
We are.
So this seems like a really good book to read in honor of Women's History Month. Can you talk more?
I think it's a great month to read. And there's 2 things that happen in this month. So 250 years ago at this time, Turgot had who was basically the economic minister of France, closed the guilds. And so because of that, for the one artist guild that Adélaïde had joined, he put 130 women out of work. So he put thousands of men out of work. However, they had an option for them because they could just go to the king and apply for the Royal Academy. They didn't have to be good enough to get in. They just had to pay the fee and become an agréé, which is like a beginning person. And then they could go ahead and continue to paint and get money for painting. For the women, though, there was no path for them. And so they had no way to work. And so March is the anniversary of that time where these women lost their right to work.
Wow.
And so I think that's also a great thing to highlight in Women's History Month, that women have always been there working, doing their thing, but very often things happen that take away their rights. And it's even, I refer to something all the way back in Greek history in the book about discussions on the same thing. So I think this is a theme for all of us. And this month, I'm really focusing on the idea of how women get erased and how it can happen in the workforce. And I think there are many ways, and they manifest themselves in the book. So you can first denigrate them or joke about them or make jokes about how they drive or how they look or how smart they are, which just makes women step back a little bit.
Sure.
Then you can question their work. And you can say, well, I don't really think she did it. And so every name that Adélaïde is called in the book you can find it in the records. She was called all those names. She was definitely accused of having men paint her things. And then you can go along and you can say, well, now this person can't paint under their own name.
Yeah.
And you think about what's happening today. If suddenly you're a nurse or you're a teacher and this is no longer a profession. So you can't get money to do these things. So you stop the avenues of work for a person. And then you can really basically annihilate them by saying, well, you can't even use your own name now. Can't use it. And this takes away all of your ability. And you might destroy their work. So then there are no memorials to what they did. So all these things can happen, and they happen to Adélaïde, but they happen to other women. And so I think in Women's History Month, it's really important to focus on how women get pushed out, how they get diminished in what they produce, and how then ultimately they are disappeared from history.
Yeah.
So you have this woman who was very famous in her time. People flocked to listen to her. They read her tracts on women's education. And she went to the highest levels of the nation to argue for women and their rights to education, to being someone we didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
Right. In her own lifetime.
And this happens over and over and over again.
Right.
Theodora, the Byzantine empress, was pretty much erased from history.
Yeah. So I think, how does that happen, and how do women prevent it from happening? And there, I don't want to give any more of the book away, and I won't. So there's a tiny bit of an answer in there about how these things can happen. So
something to think about for sure.
Yeah.
I just read a book, and we just interviewed Emma Gray on the podcast, and she wrote Start at the End. And there's a theme in that book where the main character is in academia and her professor steals from her.
That happened a lot.
And today we just had lunch with a colleague who talked about how, this happens so much in academia and really in every profession for women, where men are taking credit for their work. But more than that, telling them that you didn't do this. You weren't capable of this. This is mine.
Right.
And women believe it, because they're in a especially, if they're in their 20s and they're at university, they believe, oh yeah, maybe I'm not good enough, and we lose that feeling. And it takes a special person like Adélaïde to say, no, I do have the skill and I will do this.
There's something I've been thinking about lately, and maybe I'm completely wrong, but I don't think men have affirmations on their bathroom mirrors. Why do we need that? I've really been thinking about that a lot lately. Why do we need that? And it's because maybe we're constantly told we can't. And so we have to have something to remind us that we can. And I'm not sure, but that's been playing in my head a lot lately. So maybe I have to write some modern thing about a woman and her affirmations on her bathroom mirrors.
Who was the Saturday Night Live, the character? I'm good enough.
Stuart Smalley?
Stuart Smalley. I'm good enough. I'm smart enough. And gosh darn it, people like me.
Yeah. Whereas even the company I worked for, good enough never is. So not the one I work for now, but that was part of what our mantras were for the company. Good enough never is. But the pressure, I think, on women is even harder when you hear things like that.
Absolutely. Well, and I think, reading about characters like Adélaïde remind us that we do we have an obligation, to follow our dreams and to believe in ourselves and to remember these stories.
Yes, because I think there is always space for success for people who keep going on and keep pushing against that. You'll get there.
100%. 100%. Any comments from the male in the room?
I'm just coasting through life on my whiteness and maleness.
Well, I tell you what, one thing I'm so grateful for is the fact that I've heard from so many men who are reading my book.
Oh, that is
And
cool.
that really, one of the things, yes, I'm writing about a woman and I'm writing about a woman's issue of time, but this happens to marginalized people too. This is not just what happens to women.
Absolutely.
And there are so many men in the book that help and also have their own challenges in there. And so I didn't want to make it this two-dimensional thing. The other men are struggling with fitting in. They're immigrants. They're not of the right religion. And so they're also trying to get ahead in this very competitive environment. And even their association with Adélaïde harms them. So I didn't want to make it just this one-sided thing. I wanted to look at all those complexities.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big topic we could really dive into right now.
Right. So I love it that men are telling me I'm at this part in the book. So that I'm so happy because I didn't want it to just be
For
a
women.
book that women read and men did not read.
And I think in so many ways, the patriarchy is a form of classism as well, as is pretty much everything we see, racism and, people
All about power.
It's all about power and money.
And keeping power
Exactly.
for whoever is in power. They don't want to let it go, as opposed to thinking maybe if we all shared it, what could we possibly do if we all shared? It's the idea of there's enough oranges or whatever that metaphor is.
Those are some scary words. People at the top do not want us to get along and to agree on things.
Right, because then they would lose their power. Absolutely.
That's the second time we said the same thing at the same time.
That's because we know each other so well.
Welcome to Meeting One. We'll be here again next week. You can join us. Janell, what are you working on now?
So I am working on, when I'm not getting distracted, I'm working on my memoir, which it's in its second writing. It's kind of been in its second writing for a few months because I'm getting this book out. But my memoir is called Not That Black, Growing Up Biracial and Adopted into a White Household in the 1960s. So that is about my search for belonging and connection and feeling like I even existed.
Yeah.
So I think that's, and that's can be a lifelong struggle for adoptees. And so what I really am enjoying about that is the nature of the relationships of women, mothers and grandmothers and daughters in there. And even using tarot cards to help me figure out some of that just has been a little bit on the fun side.
Yeah.
To get through that. So that's out there, and I hope that will be out sometime next year. So I've got to just finish up that second writing. And the next project is another person that is one of the characters inside Adélaïde, Painter of the Revolution, and that is Madame David, and also her relationship with the painter Jacques-Louis David. So there's a story there.
Okay.
And what I came to her, I know that she divorced her husband in 1793.
Which is shocking.
Which is very shocking
Yeah.
that happened. So beyond that, I found her signature when she signed her divorce papers, and her hand was shaking.
Wow. Yeah.
So there's such humanity in that.
Yeah.
And she divorced him, and yet when he was facing the guillotine, because he was one of Robespierre's right-hand men, she came back and saved his life.
Really?
So
Oh,
that one's
wow.
going to be
That'll be interesting.
very
Spoilers.
fun one.
Yeah.
No. And really, it's like, how do you do these things?
Yeah.
And that is the premise that I started down that road was, how do women stay with bad men? That was kind of the thing. But there's more layers. Of course, there are layers in that. And that's going to be a fun one.
Yeah. Well, I want to go back to your memoir because I think, the life you've lived is definitely what leads you to discover these women.
It is. And I think that's where the layers come in the book, because my life is very layered.
Indeed. You just lost your mom, too.
I did. Yes, last Monday. As a matter of fact, my adoptive mother passed away, and she was 95. So she had an incredibly long life, and she was a survivor. I mean, she survived cancer. She survived a transfusion, and when she got hepatitis C, like when my brother was born.
Wow.
That was 61 years ago.
Wow.
So you know, she has survived a lot, to a long time. And she was from a different era. And so, you know, the perspectives of the grandmother and the mother and the different eras, I think, are going to be fascinating in my memoir.
Well, I look forward to reading it. I've read parts of it, and so I know it uncovers a lot, and it's a very brave, raw, beautifully written memoir. So I look forward to it.
Thank you so much.
But for right now, I want to encourage our listeners to purchase and read Adélaïde, Painter of the Revolution, available where all books are sold. And if you would like to learn more about Janell Strube, you can visit her on her website at janellstrube.com. Also, subscribe to her Substack at Janell Strube. Follow her on Facebook at janell.strube and on Instagram at Janell Strube. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really, I enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you, Jennifer, for having me, and thank you, Chad, for having me. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's really fun.
We even got to have you in studio, which is nice.
I know. I was so excited. It's it's beautiful down here. So I was so glad to come down here.
Well, thank you. We'll have you again when your memoir comes out.
Perfect. I'll be back.
All right, friends, this has been another episode of The Premise. You can visit us online at thepremisepod.com and subscribe and rate or review The Premise wherever you get your podcasts. Those reviews really help us get the word out, and it helps people like Janell sell more books. Be sure to mark your calendars, folks, for the 7th Annual San Diego Writers Festival. That's happening on March 28th at the Coronado Public Library. And this year's keynote is, Jodi Picoult. Did I say that right?
So exciting.
I know, it's so exciting.
Amazing.
And you can also follow me, your host, on Instagram at Jennifer Grace, or follow me on Facebook at Jennifer Thompson Consulting. And I just want to close by saying Janell has been the San Diego Writers Festival's volunteer coordinator for many years in a row, and you just kick ass at that. And thank you so much for all of your help with the festival over the years.
It was really fun. I really love to do it. I discovered that I have this talent for getting 100 people to do something. It's amazing, actually.
It's very amazing.
Secret sauce. But this year I'm going to be on a panel.
I know you are.
So I'm going to be based on so I'm going to be on the panel of the historical writers. And it's based on a true story. So I'm so excited to do that.
I will be there. I'm also going to be on a panel talking about publishing. And yeah, it's going to be a good year.
Yeah. And
I, on the other hand, will not be on any panels.
No panels
nor
for
will I
Chet.
be speaking.
Well, you could probably be
like
a volunteer.
You just
be the
lurks in the background.
But I do want to do a shout out for the volunteers because they make the festival happen.
Indeed.
They make people have an amazing day. And I will still be hosting the breakfast for the volunteers. So if you want really good food, show up in the morning and volunteer.
I just want to tell everyone that there was one year when Janell was not our volunteer coordinator. And I remember walking dark times. We walked into the volunteer room, and there's waters, and I don't know, there might have been some crackers.
And those bars that are like mostly nuts and kind of
Kind bars. Yeah. I think I bought those at Costco, actually. And then there's the year that Janell took over, and there's tablecloths and awesome gold plates, and like everything was beautiful, and there's like grapes and there's charcuterie boards, and I was like, whoa, like it was fucking awesome. I'm just gonna say it. And the teachers lounge was cool. It was cool. But everyone wanted to go to the volunteer lounge.
The volunteer lounge is where
it's at.
Absolutely. So all these years in hospitality, I love it.
Well,
so it's really good.
You make people feel welcome. That is a superpower of yours, for sure.
So thank you. I've loved it. And that breakfast is still going to be there this year.
Awesome.
So volunteer, show up.
Yeah, definitely. Still looking for volunteers for the San Diego Writers Festival. Just go to the website, sandiegowritersfestival.com, volunteer, and you will not be disappointed. It's a wonderful day. Until next week, thank you, friends. We appreciate you being here. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.